Governments responded positively to demands for change caused by industrialization. How far do you agree? The statement that governments responded positively to demands for change caused by industrialization is only partially true for Britain in the period c. 1750–1850. While governments did eventually introduce some reforms in response to the social and economic pressures generated by rapid industrial growth, particularly in factory conditions and public health, their overall approach remained dominated by laissez-faire principles. Responses were often belated, limited in scope, permissive rather than compulsory, and driven more by moral outrage, middle-class pressure, or fear of disorder than by a proactive commitment to addressing working-class demands. Political demands for representation were firmly resisted. Therefore, I would argue that governments responded only reluctantly and partially, and frequently opposed or ignored the most pressing calls for fundamental change. Industrialization created massive social strains, overcrowded towns, long working hours, often 12–16 hours per day, child labor, dangerous machinery, periodic unemployment, and epidemics, cholera in 1831–32 and 1848–49. These conditions sparked demands for reform from philanthropists, radicals, trade unions, and the emerging working-class movements. Governments did pass some factory legislation, which can be seen as a positive, albeit limited, response. The Health and Morals of Apprentices Act 1802, very limited, only pauper apprentices in cotton mills. The Cotton Mills and Factories Act 1819 restricted children under 9 from working in cotton mills and limited hours for under 16s to 12 per day, but enforcement was weak. The Factory Act 1833, following the Sadler Committee revelations, banned under 9s, limited 9 13-year-olds to 9 hours, and introduced the Factory Inspectorate, a significant step in accepting state intervention. The Mines Act 1842 banned women and girls underground and boys under 10. Prompted by shocking 1842 Royal Commission reports on moral as well as physical conditions. The 10 Hours Act 1847 limited women and young persons, 13–18, to 10 hours in textile factories. These acts show gradual acceptance that industrial conditions required regulation, moving away from pure non-intervention. Humanitarian Tories, e.g., Ashley and some Whigs, pushed these through against strong employer opposition. The Public Health Act 1848 created a General Board of Health and allowed, but did not compel, local boards to improve sanitation, water supply, and sewerage, a direct response to Edwin Chadwick's 1842 sanitary report and the 1848 cholera epidemic. These measures suggest some positive response, especially after c. 1830–40, when the scale of problems became undeniable. However, several factors show the response was far from positive or comprehensive. Most factory legislation focused narrowly on women and children. Adult male workers were largely unprotected until much later. Enforcement remained patchy, inspectors were under-resourced, and many manufacturers evaded rules. The Public Health Act 1848 was permissive. Many local authorities ignored it until the 1870s. The Poor Law Amendment Act 1834 actually worsened conditions for many. It aimed to make relief less eligible than the lowest paid work, pushing the poor into harsh workhouses. This was a response to industrial poverty, but was punitive rather than supportive. Politically, governments were hostile to working-class demands. Chartism, 1838–48, called for universal male suffrage, secret ballot, annual parliaments, etc., directly linked to industrial distress and exclusion from the 1832 Reform Act. All governments, Whig and Tory, rejected the petitions. Repression followed. Newport Rising 1839, 1848 Kennington Common. Laissez-faire ideology dominated. Governments believed interference distorted markets. Even Peel, 1840–146, despite repealing the Corn Laws, 1846, under middle-class pressure, maintained minimal state intervention in labor markets. In conclusion, while governments did respond positively in limited areas, especially factory conditions for children, women, and some public health measures, the response was slow, partial, and often reactive to crises rather than proactive. They consistently resisted the deeper political and economic demands arising from industrialization, especially from the working classes. The persistence of laissez-faire, the harshness of the new poor law, and the suppression of Chartism suggest governments more often opposed or ignored demands for fundamental change than embraced them. Overall, I disagree with the statement. Governments responded positively only to a limited extent and far more reluctantly than willingly.